What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be finishing off our YAVIN 4 map guide, this time focusing on the defending side, which is of course the Rebel Alliance. Now if you haven't seen the attacking guide, then don't worry, there will be a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen, so make sure to go and check that one out after the video. Seeing as YAVIN is a pretty big map, we're going to go ahead and get stuck right into it without wasting any more time. So as the Rebels, you'll start off the first phase with 3 different objectives to defend, all of which the Empire will need to plant an explosive to blow up the turbo lasers. There's the one over to the left side of the map, which is one of the harder ones to defend, seeing as the enemies can come from just about anywhere. Then there's the middle objective in the courtyard, that's definitely a lot easier to defend, seeing as the Rebels get a much better view of the area from their side. And then there's also one over on the right side of the map, which is pretty much identical to the one on the left side. So usually from the start of the game, I'll just head to the side that I spawn on and try and set up as well as I can for that first wave of enemies, so there's not really any part of the map that I'd recommend heading to first. The majority of your teammates will head straight for the middle objective, so that's probably the least important one in the first part of the game, seeing as the 2 side objectives are usually going to be a fair bit more open for attack. Once I have taken out a few enemies and stopped that initial rush, I usually try and head in towards the middle of the map in this area with the 2 staircases, as this seems to be where the majority of the enemies will funnel through. You pretty much just want to push up as far as you can while still having some good cover and a place to fall back to, and then all you really need to try and do at this point is just to try and cut them off from making it up either of the staircases or through the main tunnel. For this phase, I definitely have to recommend using the Assault or Officer class. However, just like I said in the attacking guide, pretty much any class can do well on this map, seeing as there are both close quarters and long range areas to get yourself into. Assault and Officer seem to be able to do pretty well at both close range and long range, so they're definitely well suited to this map all round, and if I had to say, then I definitely would recommend those 2 over the other classes. Now if you do get pushed back from that front entrance area, then the next best spot on the map is in this main courtyard area, and to be honest, you really should try and prioritise this objective over the others, seeing as it is definitely a lot easier to defend, especially once you and your team are well set up. If you try and lurk on the enemy side of the courtyard, then you'll find a lot of enemies dropping down and running straight past you, which makes for easy pickings, and usually you'll be able to take out most of them before they even have a chance to fight back. Now if you do happen to get pushed back from this first phase, then you'll be on to phase 2, and this phase involves 2 more objectives that are both capture points rather than planting explosives. The first one is over on the left side of the map, and this one can be pretty hard to defend at times, seeing as it is so open, and with such a large area it can be hard to keep track of where the enemies are. The second objective is all the way over on the right side of the map inside this temple, and this one can be easier to defend. However, if they do make it inside quickly, it can be extremely hard to win it back. Now because of that, I always tend to head to the right side objective first to try and stop the initial wave of enemies breaking in, as like I said, once they do get in there, it's almost impossible to win the area back. Rather than waiting inside the actual building itself though, I try to head outside and play super aggressive so the enemies have some trouble actually making it anywhere near the building in the first place. The longer it takes them to get inside, the less likely they'll be to capture the objective, so if you can cut them off outside for as long as possible, then you'll go a long way towards helping your team get the win. Again, for this phase, I'd definitely recommend the Assault or Officer classes, although if you do have the battle points to spend, then the Rocket Trooper is probably one of the best classes in the game for this phase. Not only can you get around the map a whole lot quicker and take out any stragglers, but you can also use the jetpack to get up on top of the temple itself, and then once you are up there, you're usually going to be able to do really well in terms of defending the area. As for the objective on the left side, this one can be a little hard to defend as well, as like I said, the capture point is pretty big, meaning there are heaps of places the enemies can hide and capture it at the same time. With that being said, if you do stay on the move and try and stay near cover, then you should be able to take care of any enemies that do come within the capture point. One thing I've noticed on this objective is that ATSTs can be absolutely dominant due to the open area and limited cover, but rather than trying to hide from them, your best bet is actually just to find some cover and try and take them out, and hopefully some of your teammates will have this same idea as well. Now, just like the right side objective, you should try and play aggressively to keep the enemies pushed back. If you let them come to you, then just like I mentioned, they can easily get within the capture point and hide, meaning you will have to go and snuff them out regardless. I usually try to push up as far as I possibly can, and even if you can only take out 2 or 3 enemies, then that's still going to help the rest of your teammates focus on other areas of the capture point. Now again, if you do happen to get pushed back, then you'll move on to the third phase of the map, and this one's definitely a lot easier to defend than the second phase. The objective on your right side or the enemy's left is right here next to the Falcon, sitting on the little staircase area, while the objective on your left or the enemy's right is on this little catwalk area next to the Y-Wing starfighter. Now, speaking of the Y-Wing, you can actually play as a Y-Wing on this phase, and I feel like this is actually a really underused feature, as I don't really see all that many people using it. It is on rails, meaning you can only use the turret rather than actually flying it, and don't get me wrong, it's definitely not the most powerful thing in the game, but if you do have a chance to use it, then there's really no reason not to, as some gunfire from the air is always going to send the enemies into a bit of a panic, and that's definitely always a good thing for the rest of your teammates. Not only that, but it can rake in the battle points as well. Even if you do get taken out quickly, you can easily earn around 2,000 or 3,000 battle points in just a matter of minutes. Now, if you do decide to use it, keep in mind that you will most likely get taken out of the air fairly quickly, seeing as it is pretty easy to take down since it's on rails, but like I said, even just sending your enemies into a bit of a panic for a few minutes is always going to be helpful for your team, so despite its weaknesses, it's definitely a solid feature to make the most of. As for down on the ground, like I mentioned for the second phase, you really can't go past the rocket trooper for this part of the map. Their blaster is perfectly suited to this whole area, and the fact that you can jetpack around and get in and out of the action quickly is definitely a really big help. Defending the right objective is pretty self-explanatory. I usually just tend to head up onto the Falcon and try and get some cover while fending off anyone that does come close to the objective. There's plenty of cover scattered around this map, so really all you need to do for this objective is just set up camp and try to take out anyone that comes out of the tree line. As for the objective over near the Y-Wing, this one is usually a fair bit more chaotic, and again the Rocket Trooper really does do well in this section of the map. If you don't have enough battle points for the Rocket Trooper, then I'd definitely recommend either the Assault or Specialist class with the A280 or A280 CFE, as having some longer range on this part of the map while still being able to do well at close range is definitely going to help you out a whole lot. By this point you may have enough battle points for a hero, and if you do, then Yoda is by far the best character to defend these objectives. Being able to block blasters and explosives while standing in the way of the objective is pretty much impossible to stop unless the enemies do have a few really smart villains running around. Unless there are villains or half a team worth of enemies all swarming you at once, there's really not a whole lot they can do to stop you just standing right next to the objective, and if they are dumb enough to come at you one by one, then you're going to be in a pretty good spot to get some fast and easy kill streaks. Now, if you do happen to get pushed back, then you'll be onto the fourth and final phase of the map, and this one is fairly self-explanatory, so I won't need to say a whole lot. However, I will still go over some of the basics for any of you that do struggle on this last phase. There are two more objectives to worry about in this last phase, with this one on the right being probably the easier to defend, as you can get a really good view of the room from upstairs, and then if you head all the way over to the left side of the map, then you'll find the other objective, which can be pretty hard to defend, as the entrances to the room definitely favour the Empire over the Rebels. Now, like I said, this phase is pretty hard to give tips on, as it really does just come down to getting into the rooms where the objectives are and doing your best to defend them. It's far too chaotic to have any real strategy, and even if I do give you some really solid advice, it pretty much all just goes out the window once the enemies all start piling into the area. For this phase, I'd recommend just going with whichever class you feel most comfortable with. The Assault and Heavy classes are probably the two most useful, and obviously both reinforcements are really helpful for this section of the map as well. As for the heroes, pretty much every hero can do well in this phase, so I don't really have any that I'd specifically recommend, but if you do get a hero, then you do need to make sure you are getting in amongst the action, otherwise your team is going to really suffer from not having your help on the objective. I see a lot of people getting heroes and then just sitting away from the action, but there's really no point to actually staying out of the action, because even if you do survive, the enemy team is most likely going to win if you don't help out, meaning survival is pretty much pointless. Like I said, just make sure to get yourself close to the objective and pretty much just keep an eye on all the entrances, and if your teammates are on the same page, then hopefully you'll be able to hold on and come home with the win. So that is going to wrap up our YAVIN 4 map guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips helped you out, and if they did, then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel. At this point, I'm not 100% sure yet, but this video will most likely be going up the day before or the day of the Geonosis update, as I wanted to get both of these out before Geonosis arrived. Geonosis will be the next map guide, and I'm going to try my hardest to get that out for you guys as soon as possible, so definitely keep an eye out for that. It all just comes down to how quickly the cinematic tools are updated and how quickly I can manage to consistently do well on the map itself. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.